Hello and welcome to Astro Extra Uranus in Aries. My friendly Virgos, how are you doing? Thanks for logging in. We've got an exciting time here in reality with Uranus moving into Aries. This is the first time Uranus has been in Aries for 86 years, which means for the Virgo state of consciousness, this is the first time this sector of your consciousness has been innovated or upgraded. Make sure you watch the introduction video because that gets deep on what Uranus is and what Aries is. But in essence, Aries is where we draw our strength out of our chart. But before we get into Uranus and Aries, let's review Uranus in Pisces, shall we? In 2003, Uranus entered into Pisces, and for the Virgos, this was the beginning of innovating your relationships. This is the consciousness that deals with keeping balance in your life, keeping balance between you and another person, which is relationships, and the way you relate to yourself as well. So think back to 2003. Between 2003 and 2010, you were innovating the way you approached relationships. And in that same sector of time, you also went through a Saturn transit. So your ego went through some breakdown, breakthrough, and kind of clearing off. But by now, you should be in a whole new place when it comes to relationships. You should be in a place where you relate differently, that you want different things out of your relationships. And most importantly, you should be treating yourself much better than you were in 2003. The mirage, as I like to say, the way you relate to oneself. So take a look at that arc, how you've changed. Now, if you're in your 20s, you might have just thought that was growing up. But if you were past 30 and on, where you're more established energetically, you should see a distinct difference in the way you have related and the type of relationships that you want. Most of my Virgo clients actually went through a relationship change in that 7-year period. Marriages ended in divorce, and Virgos found new people. And as of this tape date, most Virgos I know right now are ready for a relationship. They know what they want, but they haven't yet drawn it in. So don't feel bad if you haven't drawn yours in just yet. It will come soon with Uranus moving into Aries. Here's why. With Uranus in Aries, you will spend the next 7 years now innovating your intimacy, your potential for connecting to someone else. And on a deeper level, this is really your boundaries, where you draw boundaries. We have a state of consciousness, which is ruled by Scorpio, that does nothing but maintain and manage our boundaries. Where do I draw the line with myself? When have I had too much to drink? When have I been too reluctant to open up to receiving affection? Do you receive compliments? Can you receive? That's part of your boundary issue as well. And boundaries that relate to your soul capital, which is something that you're working on with Saturn and Libra at this tape date. In other words, where you draw your boundaries determines how valuable you are. If it's hard to get in you, or if it's hard to get to you, then you are very valuable, right? It comes down to supply and demand. But that control over your soul capital comes down to where you draw your boundaries. So between now and March of 2012, Uranus will be between 0 and 5 degrees. Those are the most volatile degrees in a Uranus transit, which means there will be breakdown. Breakdown in your life, breakdown in your own intimacy factor, and basically what will break down are boundaries that don't serve you. So this can manifest in a myriad of ways. The most fun way is to have an amazing lover show up who wants to be intimate, and the work is that you have to open up. That's probably the most fun way, although kind of scary as well. And that does happen. So building off of the relationship transit, some of my clients do right away draw in an intimate lover who has an ability to get right through your walls, and you're kind of freaking out trying to figure out how did he or she do that? How do they get past the guards? But also this is breakdown in boundaries that don't serve you. If you're a person that needs to install boundaries, for instance, maybe you drink too much when you go out and party, this is a time where it could turn into a DUI very easily. I've seen that happen a lot, where you're not maintaining your boundaries and it finally gets you in trouble. Got away with it for years, but suddenly now with Uranus in the 8th house, you're not getting away with it. Also, boundaries as it relates to surrendering boundaries to yourself. It goes the opposite way. Maybe you were damaged in childhood. Those of you who come from sexual abuse or any type of abuse where you were betrayed or someone crossed your boundary without asking permission, those areas will need to be healed too. So you might have a little internal kind of meltdown that forces you to go to therapy and start to heal those boundaries and allow yourself to open up, etc., and allow yourself to receive in that regard. After Uranus gets past the first 5 degrees, most of the breakdown will be over, in the sense of things collapsing around you or your life not working because of a boundary issue. And from 5 degrees on, for the rest of the 7-year transit, you'll be actively engaging and innovating where your boundaries are. And when I say innovating, I mean, let's use the example of getting into a hot tub, okay? You don't like hot water, or maybe getting into a cold ocean. You don't like to swim in the cold. Well, after 5 degrees, between 0 and 5 degrees, God universe is going to push you in that water. But let's say you're only kind of ankle high. Each year, as Uranus progresses through the degrees, you'll get pushed in a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper, till you get used to the cold, till you get used to the hot tub, whatever that is, till you get used to trust and intimacy. For those of you who are battling your sexuality, as far as who you want to be with or what sex you want to be with or confusion around what gender you want to be with, you will most likely work through that equation in the next 7 years. And by the time Uranus exits, you'll know exactly who you want to connect to and who you don't. And for those of you who have been betrayed by loss via death, in other words, you lost a parent at an early age, or you've lost a spouse or a partner or a child, something like that, this Uranus in the 8th house is going to be an innovation of that. It's going to be a healing of that, an allowance for you to let someone in again, and also you kind of dealing with the fact that they have moved on. In some cases, rare cases, people do lose someone during this transit. And in that case, it's usually about a very pronounced boundary, the loss of someone. And if that's the case, your boundaries were probably not in good array. They were probably naive. Usually what happens is when we have a loss like that, we're not conscious of the consequences of loss. We're not conscious of the boundaries of life and death. In many cases, people lose a spouse or a partner when they haven't done a lot of spiritual work, and by the loss of them, what are you doing? You're constantly crossing the boundary and praying, crossing the boundary and trying to connect to the other side. So a lot of people will go through that during this transit. But in essence, it's time for Virgos to get closer to people. And I think that for most of the stories I know of Virgos in this lifetime, Virgos have been very giving, very loving, there for everyone else. And in most of my clients' cases, Virgos and their boundary issues deal with the fact that they give too much away. And also because Virgos have usually been burned, and Virgos usually have had a lot of bad cases where they gave too much and they were taken advantage of. Most Virgos I know are going to be learning how to open up and trust, in some cases in their 50s for the first time. So I think a lot of this is really intimacy transit for Virgos. But the very good news is this. After a 7-year transit with long-term relationships and learning how to balance yourself in a relationship, intimacy is the next chapter that naturally follows, which means if you are single and you're looking to fall in love and you want a partner, really good news for you. It's very hard to do an intimacy transit by yourself. This is one of those kind of bingo, go spaces that tells us astrologers, oh yeah, you'll most likely meet someone. I know 7 years is a long-term span. It depends on how much boundary work you need before they show up. But it's very highly likely that you will draw in someone because you can't do an intimacy transit by yourself. All right, Virgo, that wraps up Uranus and Aries. I will be back from time to time as planet shift signs. And until then, Virgin, not soon, live, love, be.
So God